Okay, so primer coat is all done and on now. A couple of little things we have done. We've popped around and just rescribed around the nose here, up here, and on the other side. Just little things should have done before but didn't spot it. So all we've done, straightforward, scribing template over the top, use the needle and just run it around a few times. That's the only one. And generally just having a look over it, really happy of how smooth it's gone on. We've got no seams where we took care of the actual seam lines running down there. They've all gone very nicely and everything else. So what we've actually got now is a good, real nice starting place. Smooth paintwork, ready to go on. So what we're going to do with this one, something's a little bit different. Start off with, we're going to use chipping weathering using mask oil. Now I know there's lots of new ways of doing it, and newfangled, and there's salt techniques and everything else. Every single time I do, I end up coming back to the way I know best, okay, and that is by using my legendary now, probably 15-year-old mask oil that I'm still working my way through, which to be honest has probably turned to gel. It's no longer runny anymore, it's more consistency of like cream cheese, okay, but we're going to be using that. So what we need to do is start the layering process. So funny enough, with all weathering, you start by putting the weathering down first and working your way back to fresh new paint, and then you work into weathering again. So it's sort of a, a roller coaster ride with doing this one. To start off with, what we're going to have to do is put down the actual base colours on here, which I've left over here. For my purpose, what we're going to try and do is recreate the primers underneath and the sort of metally type of colours. But the thing is, because of this scale, if you go in and start putting silver on at this stage, it's going to be too bright, it's going to really blow your mind and stand out in your face. So we're going to replace with any silvering metals with a light grey. And we've got here some XF54, which we're going to use for that primer type of colour that naval type of aircraft tend to have back in the sort of mid part of the century last year. They sent it last time they used to go through. So what we're going to do, we're just going to spray over, not everywhere, just in some of the walk areas where these colours actually go. So what we're going to do, we're going to grab some of the yellow stuff first. So what we're going to do, we'll just grab some thinners, being a bit more careful this time. Okay, and we're not going to need much for this, so all we're going to do is probably put in 1/2 mil down in there, and then 50-50 mix, again, paint on the top. Okay, bit of a mix, got a bit of a leaky airline going on down here, which we'll have a look for later on. Okay, so usual thing, we'll just check our flow. Now this doesn't have to be particularly nice, pretty or anything else. Now we're not going to go absolutely everywhere with this charging round. All we're going to do is some of these upper type areas. So what we're going to do is just pick out some of the little walkways. Now we know this area down the back isn't a walkway, but it's a multitude of access panels to get to the top of these engines. So they're going to be a little bit scuffed up too. So all we're going to do is literally just go round for the moment, putting in some little bits on some of the panels. Okay, let's run around like this and just these centres. Okay, a little bit running over. Around the back here, in the middle, got these hatches at the top. Okay, but we're not trying to go everywhere here, we're just trying to put it down. Now it doesn't matter if we go too heavy at this point, because we've got the next one is going to go on and take care. So we're just trying to spray an effect in here. Same on these outer ones, I'm sure we're going to have it a lot around the wing fold mechanism. The boom's going across, it's really hard to see in black and white photos if they've got any. But we've got access panels down the side here that do, and we're just going to pull a few lumps, bumps and areas perhaps that may do across the top here. And at this point, don't start panicking about, oh God, I've ruined it, because we're going to go over the top of this. So it doesn't matter if you make a complete hash of this and go through. And I'm sure my compressor is starting to play up, because it seems to be coming up for air far too often. So we've done the midsection, which I call the walkway over the top here like this. Now what we're going to do is just going to walk a little bit, tiny bit around the fronts. Okay, but as I said, we're not trying to go around anywhere, we're just picking out the odd little bit and piece as we come through. Okay. So we're just do a few like this. And what we'll do, we're just going to pick out a few on the tail. So we just go along, shoot along some big panel lines perhaps. Okay. All these areas, so we just shoot along. So this is the fun bit. Okay, this is the bit where it doesn't really tend to matter how it's going. So these hatches, we're going to give any access hatches on the bottom, we're going to give quite a bit, just to give them a sort of noticeable change. Now we're not trying to give this aircraft a kicked in look, all we're trying to do is give it a faded, so don't panic too much. This isn't going to be what we're going to get at the end of this, or hope not, but what it should do is enable us to get some of the details into this, and at this point we can sort of just go around and say, yeah, okay, well I know it's not going to be like this everywhere, but certainly a little bit later on we can bring up some of this weathering area. We're going to do around this speed brake area. I imagine it gets a bit of wear and tear, any sharp edges, and we're just going to do the fronts of these booms just like that. Okay, so that's that bit done. We'll do the same on the wings as well, so we're just going to run a little bit, not too much to the edges, but certainly access points are all going to get a bit of colour. Used but not abused is my favourite word for all of this. We're trying to make it look, you know, worn a little bit, but I don't want it to get that sort of horrible look. And I know I probably get flamed for it, but a lot of the armour guys especially, you know, they go right over the top and make them look like they've been to hell and back, which I'm sure is great and looks lovely, but in reality is, I'm sure half of them would have been destroyed before they got that dirty. But there we go. I'm just trying to go through. So at this point, you can say to yourself, oh look, it's too much and this, that and the other. Then don't worry, because all we're going to be doing now over the next few stages is covering this up. Okay? So don't be too frightened to get in there and paint this. Use it somewhat as perhaps a test technique to see how your paintwork's getting, things like that. A little bit on the leading edges. Just stand that up at the back, perhaps this one as well, a little bit on the leading edges. Okay. That's very nice. Now this tail, I'm not too sure how much it gets, so I'm just going to pop a tiny little bit down here. Some of these workload areas. Just pop a little shade in everywhere. Certainly fuel tanks. These are going to be white, so we're just going to pop out perhaps some of the areas on here, perhaps around the front. So we just hang them up in the mesh. Should get your block out really. Okay. So we're almost there. So take out. Okay, just put it on the front. Okay, lovely. Now what we can do is just tip this yellow back in. Now there is a reason for not doing the speed brake. What I like to do is pick out occasional panels on aircraft that look like they've either come off of another aircraft or perhaps they're in a situation where they you know, have been repainted, things like that. So that's the thing with that. We just do a very fast colour change here. Okay, we just poke this in here, just spray all this out. We'll leave in the colour in and some of the thinners because we're going to use it for the grey going on in a moment. So we're not going to wipe it out and go all overboard. So all we're going to do, again, just grabbing a bit of thinners, probably way too much there because we're going to need even less for this run. Okay, just goes in. And then from my point of view, we're going to be using XF54. Which I wish I had some in the colour. Bear with me one moment, just whilst I grab a new pot. But use all these areas when you're doing this type of painting as almost a sort of a practice run, because you can have a go at perhaps doing in between the panel lines with it, because as I said, if it goes wrong, don't worry about it. If it looks too wet, just move away. Okay, let it dry off, come back, that's better. Alright, so we're just going to do standard 50-50 mix, like we do the others, but obviously it's got a bit of colour in here. Let's grab that. Alright, so we just grab that again. Okay, check our flow. Okay, we've got the grey coming through now. Now remember, we've got white going on the underside. Okay, and then we've got, sorry, we're hissing all underneath here. So we've got, this is going to be grey going down here, and then we're going to have white over the top of it. So what we want to do now is tone down this a little bit, but not cover it all up. So all we're trying to do perhaps is pick out little areas all around it. Okay, so check your flow, you're happy it's coming through, it's a little bit slow. Okay. But this, as you can see, we're covering without covering, if that makes sense. We're just trying to give it a, tone it down between the two and give it this type of look. Certain areas we're going to leave it. So if you imagine we're trying to tone down, so between the primer that we've got down here now, when we mask oil all this up, hopefully we'll get some nice little effects come through. It will look like toned down primers and things. This is the type of thing we're trying to do. Now a lot of people have asked about doing this on other things. Of course you can. You can do this on armour, you can do it on anything you like. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just whip around and do this to the wings and all the other areas. Okay, so there we go, looking a little bit grimy, okay, and actually, to be honest, it's not too bad a colour at all. We've got a nice mixture of faded in, so it's not going to stand out too much. Now, especially on the bottom, it's going to be particularly difficult because obviously you've got colours such as white show absolutely everything. So, what we're going to do now is take a sponge. Now this sponge here, all I've done is attack it with a pair of scissors, literally just hack into it, just to knock it off. So it's not square and flat, so it's got some little fluffy bits and hangy bits and things like that on there. Okay, then what we're going to do, this is my mask oil, which unfortunately has turned a little bit like cream cheese. So all we do is just pop the bristles in it like this, okay, and then all we're going to do is just taking it around and gently dabbing it. Now, just be very, very gentle, and just remember the golden rule here that less is definitely best here. And be careful how you go around, because you end up taking off areas. But all we're trying to do is just create that illusion of one. Now, as I say, don't go over the same place twice, otherwise you end up taking it off. But all you're trying to do, just gently tap around and trying to keep it as random as you possibly can. So then what will happen is, hopefully, some of this will show up when we come to the next painting. Now again, don't panic too much on this, because if it doesn't work, we can always quite happily switch back, revert back, okay, and use other techniques at any later stage. Now we're just going to put quite a bit on these wing fold areas, because I imagine they're going to get a bit of use. Okay, because we're trying to make light scuffing, and what this enables us to do using the sponge like this, it gives us very light effect. Okay, so we just add a few bigger type areas. And what's going to happen is we've got this grey colour going on back here. So we're just going to perhaps some more heavy speckling around, but remember hatches get a bit, so don't be too frightened about getting in there. Just be careful you don't overdo it, which is something I'm a bit paranoid about now, is because when this stuff dries you can't really see it. So it does tend to be a little bit of a problem. So we're just putting some speckling around the front. Now as you handle this you'll lose some of this as well, it's bound to come off and all the rest of it, but hopefully you'll have certainly enough left on. But what you want to avoid is stop doing the same area. Make sure you rotate, turn the sponge and things like that. Otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to be in a situation where you've got the same shape running all the way across, and obviously we don't want that. Okay, so we're happy how that is on that side. So what we do, we just place it down and then we can go off onto the wing. So leading edges going to get quite a bit because they're going to wear off. Okay, little bits around these port hatches, the access panels. And as I say, don't panic too much. This looks horrible, doesn't work. We will literally just take it off. Just try and keep it as sharp and as random as you can. Then what you can do is when you're putting the paint on, you can look at it and think, yeah, I don't know, that's a bit too much there. You can rub it off with your finger and come back and start again. Just rotate the actual sponge. Okay. And we're just going to work everywhere we can. Just remember it's dabby movements. And just try and keep it around hatches and things like that as you make your way round. There we go. So we'll just put a little bit on these fuel tanks, especially around the front. On the bottom, so it looks like perhaps they've been laid down. Okay. Don't think everything has to match, so don't do one wing tank and think, oh, I need to do the other one exactly the same, because obviously it could be from different aircraft, different position, done a different thing, you don't know. And that's the beauty of this. Okay, so we just got this last bit to do. So what we're going to do is very lightly okay, so there we go. That's what we look. It's all dried now on here. You see the speckles and everything else. Now there's a few areas that I think are probably going to be a little bit too strong, but what we're going to do, we're going to run with it and see what it is, because we can tidy them certainly up afterwards. So next thing going on is the white paint. Now obviously lots of different manufacturers of white paint out there. Personally, never fails me is the Tamiya XF2 flat white. It goes on, it covers it extremely well, no problems anywhere with it. So give it a good old mix up first. It's really much an imperative. Now the other thing as well, you want to make sure that your airbrush is spraying nice and clear. When we say nice and clear, no spitting, because the white, you can see it. It is so easy to spot there's something up. So make sure that your airbrush is nice and clear and everything through. So what we're going to do, we just grab our areas here. So we're just making sure that you've got no nasties, lumps, bumps, or anything, because what happens is when you're using grey paint, it spits out no problem at all and you don't really see it. When you're using white paint, it is so noticeable. So we just spray this out in here. The other thing as well, make sure you've got no build up on the end of your needle, things like that on your airbrush. Move those just out the way. Okay, usual thing. Normally you do a 50-50 mix with all your paintwork, things like that, and you can thin down. When you're doing white, you want to make it a little bit thicker. The reason for making it thicker is so when it goes down, it covers better. So all we're going to do in here, probably put 1/2 ml, probably see down the bottom here. Okay, we'll put the lid on this because we'll worry about it falling off. And now, what we're going to do is probably do 1/3 white paint, flat white paint going into there. Okay, and we'll just give this a very good mix. Now again, making sure it's a good mix. You don't want to be in a situation where you've got lumps, bumps, nasties, flecks of paint. Be careful around the top of the paint bottle itself that you don't get any of those crusty bits down in there, because again what will happen is it will make thick lumpy bits as it goes through. Now first coat going on, because it's down onto white, we want it to be quite thick. So what we'll do is just move that out of the way a moment. Now we're not going to pre-shade this like we would normally do, so we'll start on a wing. So remember, you're doing the undersides of everything, okay? So all we're going to do is just laying down the paint, because it's quite thick. It's a little bit speckly, but that's fine, because that speckly means it will go on, it will stick on, no problem at all. Now we're not going to pre-shade the white, because otherwise it comes through a little bit too strong. We're going to post-shade it. And by post-shading, it means we're going to put in the panel lines afterwards. But as you can see, it colours very nicely and quite easily. So we're just making sure we do down those edges. Don't worry too much about leading edges of wings on this one, because we'll be coming back and doing it separately. But there we go, that's one wing done, nice and smooth. So we'll just stand that up out of the way a moment. Flip over our Vixen. Now, checking on your paintwork how it goes, we don't have to worry too much, because we're going to be working our way round everywhere. Now we're getting a little bit speckly. You might be able to notice on the end of the colour cup here we've got a little nobule. And what it is, it's just because it's thick paint, it's building up on the end of the air cap. As soon as that happens, it affects your spray pattern and can give you speckly finish to your paintwork. But this is quite thick, so hence whilst it is spitting, it's just because it's having trouble atomising the paint. So we're getting into those wheel wells. Okay, and this is really the paint that's going to cover the model. We'll come back with thinner coats in a moment, and what those will do is give us a more glossy finish to our paintwork. Okay, so we're going to go around everywhere. We know some of these tail booms get it, other areas don't. But this will be all masked up afterwards, so we'll just do down the sides of these tail booms. Okay, these intakes, we're going to shoot some paint all in there and take care of any overspraying and nasties we've made in there. So again, checking on your references, so we know it just comes back this middle area, down here, going to have it as well, all those areas. And then what we'll do, we'll let this dry off for about half an hour and come back and we'll give it another coat. Now it looks a bit speckly on top, but don't panic, that's just where the actual all the mask oil is built up. Okay, so we're just trying to make sure we've got a nice finish. Fuel's squared up. Nice big blob happened on the end there again. So we just wipe that off. Okay, so we know it loops underneath the nose a little bit. So we can just spray these front area. Okay, now the front of the booms don't have them at all, so they're going to be painted up separate. Okay, so just going through, round. So we've got a good cover there. We'll leave that to one side to dry off, and then we'll come back and give it a further thicker coat on there. So we're going to pop round now, and we're going to do all these wing areas and everything else. And as you can see, we're not using too much paint at all. It's not like we're using gallons of this stuff as we're moving through. But you can pop it on, you can lay it down quite thickly. You don't have to worry about runs and everything. That's why, because we're using a thicker paint versus coming in here with your standard type of 50-50 mix, which to be honest will probably give you no end of trouble.